Welcome to the latest edition of Leadership Actually. Not love actually, it's not love, it's leadership that we're talking about today. And I'm delighted to have Lisa Pownley with me.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, lovely. And Lee Rogers, I'll give you your full title.
Thanks very much.
Nice to be with you as well. And we've got a great guest. Tell us a bit more about that.
Mark Sellers, a great guest. It genuine guy, one of the best, I guess, human leaders that I've ever worked with, and no, genuinely, and actually knows a lot about commerciality, about revenues and stuff that I really, for lots of my career, didn't really understand or know anything about. So, Mark's very well placed to support us today and to have a conversation from multiple levels, from COO, from FD, MD, all the acronyms you can, but from a senior leader perspective and from an exec leadership position, and we'll get and delve into that. But first off, Lisa, what for you about commerciality?
Well, I'm going to represent the leaders who, where the words like P&L and gross margin and EBITDA, still can't remember what it stands for. What does it stand for?
You know that's been already. Go on, we'll come on to that.
Thank you. I've told you on test already. Then they gave me
didn't realise it was an interview.
Yeah.
Interrogation.
There we are. Sweaty palms, that. And I guess for me, I am a creative spirit, and I remember going into a room. My boss was called Phil, who was a numbers person, but I thought I could blind him with creativity and fantastic ideas. And I was going in heading up a customer experience program, and I had all these brilliant ideas about how it'll engage people and how brilliant. And then he was like, "Well, what about the numbers? What does it cost?" And I'd worked out, it was a bit like Dragon's Den, and I'd kind of worked out some numbers, and when I put it up on the board, he challenged every single one of them, and I just was like, and I didn't get it through. And it was a really important program, and there was lots of great ideas in there, but because the numbers didn't stack up, then I wasn't able to deliver that or influence that in the right way, and I learned a really big lesson. So, and I know I'm not the only one. I coach a lot of leaders, exec leaders, particularly in HR, and that's an area that we, commerciality, we really could do with some support. So I'm really glad that you're here today. Not to test you on EBITDA, but really, to help those leaders out there really focus on what might help in that space. About you, Lee?
Yeah, that really resonates. Having great ideas and concepts about where you can make a difference and having all the enthusiasm in the world. But actually it's an idea, isn't it? It's not necessarily structured. And I've often thought about it actually as in I'm speaking a language that's not the business language.
Yeah.
Because often when the execs that I've worked with, there'll be at least one person in that room that will talk numbers, guaranteed. Probably the majority of all of them get it. And I've done courses finance for non-financial leaders and stuff, and even that stuff's been really useful because really what we want to do is give people an insight to go, how do we help them shape their ideas, their thinking, so that they can plug it into the organisation or the corporate world where they can make it a more seamless thing, that if their idea is that good that they can convert it and speak the language of the people that are trying to influence.
I think that's really important. Does that resonate, Mark?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's one of those things that sometimes it comes naturally to people and sometimes it doesn't. And I think finance doesn't help itself. There's lots of weird and wonderful terms, as you say. There's lots of rules and regulations around things that sometimes don't make it very straightforward. And I think that confuses a lot of people. It confuses people in finance, never mind non-finance people.
Well, that's a relief, I think.
No, absolutely. And no two businesses necessarily look at things exactly the same. Some of those rules, it's not always black and white. That creates grey, that creates confusion. And I think that's why, to a lot of people, that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily come naturally, or they divert away from it.
Yes.
Because of that very reason. And I think that's one of the real challenges out there. But there are lots of ways that you can kind of demystify some of that you can actually take it back to basics. And using strong, really good finance business partners, within the business and making them part of the business can really help and get them embedded in your teams. I think finance has come an awful long way from where it was, 20, 25 years ago. It was the the accountants at the back of the office who added up the numbers when everything else was done and went and presented them, and then exactly. Exactly that, and that's what they were. And now very much the world of commerciality, finance business partners. You see a lot of finance people going into roles outside of finance as well. Whether that's, I was lucky enough to do an MD role, which was brilliant, and they really start to see the value of having a value-added sort of business partner within that team, and that's one of the things we certainly did a lot at the last place when I was at Torts. We got our finance business partners within the marketing teams, the sales teams, the operational teams, and when you get it right, they really see the value of having that within their team, and it helps them sort of shape their plans, look how to deliver things, and where the risks and the opportunities are.
Lovely. And have you always been in this area? How did you get into?
How did I get into finance?
Yeah, into finance.
So I was one of those people that always kind of thought I'd be an accountant and make it this, I don't know anything like that. I just actually I stopped doing maths at GCSE. I did not do maths A level. I was did geography at university because I loved it, but I'd done some work experience in accounting. My uncle was an accountant. I was always quite good with numbers and lists and kind of felt natural, and sort of went from there really and did the usual thing, went into practice, qualified with KPMG, but knew I didn't really want to stay in practice. I wanted to go into a business. Wanted to sort of really get involved either operationally or commercially in businesses and understand how they work, and it kind of just followed from there really. And I've been lucky enough to work for some really good businesses. Lots of challenges, quite a few of them have had their problems that we've had to work through, but that's been good experience.
Good, that's a really good journey on that part. And I guess part in that you said you understand a business like operationally and functionally.
Yeah.
I find, and do you find that there's many really capable leaders that actually haven't got underneath the skin of how it works in it operationally, functionally, and what might be the impact of that if leaders don't get under the skin?
Do you know what? I think it's one of the most important things really. So lots of businesses have lots of things going on and everyone's running around being incredibly busy. I think for me, what you need to do as a leadership team is really understand that business. So where do we make money and where do we don't make money? What are we trying to do? What are those plans? How do they look? And there'll be 3 or 4 big levers as part of that, rocks, whatever you want to call foundations within a plan that's maybe the year's plan or the next 2 or 3 years plan.
Yeah.
And what you've got to do is really extract those and be able to articulate those so that that's where people's focus and energy and attention is, not in all the little pet projects or the little things that actually, if we knock this out of the park, it might make a 0.5% difference on our profits or our cash. Whereas these 3 or 4 are the things that are really going to make the step change within the business and help us deliver it. I think that's really quite a critical skill set, and finance and the finance team should really help formulate that with the leadership team. But then what you want is to articulate those so they can then go and circulate it to their teams so that they understand not necessarily all the intricate details of every little bit of it, but actually why are these the big foundations, and then why are they the things that commercially are going to really help us step forward.
I love that. And how do you go about doing that with a leadership team? So how can this partnership work, and what do they need to do for themselves to be able to move that forward?
Yeah, I think that's where I've seen it work really well is you'll generally start off where you'll get that leadership team together, and you might have an offsite for a couple of days because you're constructing a new 3-year plan, it might be the new budget, whatever it is, and you really understand how that business operates. What is it that we're trying to do and deliver? Is this a plan for growth? Is this a plan that we're trying to take cost out of the business? Are we trying to make us more profitable, drive more cash? Are we going into new markets? Whatever those things are.
Yeah.
And then how are we going to deliver that? And what are the things that we've got to do in the business to allow us to do that? And what's that then going to cost? And what are the financial implications of doing that? So, if it's a pricing strategy, what does that mean in terms of where we're going to put ourselves against the marketplace? And for me, it's about, I talk a lot about guardrails and using guardrails in different areas of the business, because if you can agree that, for example, our pricing strategies were going to be here, but we know as the market moves and things change, we've got some guardrails to work within. You're not necessarily going from left to right, or you were going north and now you're going south. It's just deviations within that. That, if you've got the right governance around it, can then set the structure that allows the business to operate at the right level.
Yes.
But people understand the financial implications. So, for example, we decide we want to drop our price by £3 in the marketplace, and but what does that mean? Well, actually, obviously that means we're going to drive less margin. So, how much more volume do we need to get on the back of it? to make the same money, or are we looking to try and get more money, or is it because we're actually trying to just increase the customer base?
Yes.
Because that gives us more profitability down the line. It's things like that you sort of just draw around it, and it's the key elements of it that everyone ultimately can understand. But it's just using your finance business partners to help you work through that.
Yeah, real strategic thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And imagine if you're a small business asking for a friend.
Do you know any?
I guess what is just some, but I'm thinking of organisations that maybe are not looking to make a profit, so third sector organisations. What are some of the foundations of Bedrocks that is a slightly different nuance to what you just described?
I think the most important thing that everybody needs to be focused on is cash and their cash flow. And unfortunately, you see in a lot of businesses that they don't really think of it in those sorts of terms, because you have everyone gets excited about sales and profits and all this sort of stuff, all important, but cash is the thing that you really need to focus on, especially as a small business, because that is the thing that's going to make or break the business. So ultimately, what does your cash flow cycle look like? When are you paying out? What does that working capital cash flow cycle look like? When are you paying out your money, and when do you get paid back in return? What have you got to cover that? Have you got enough funding that will, help in that circumstance? That's a real critical element, I think, for small businesses, because, without cash, the business is going to die ultimately. So that's, one thing that I would definitely say that more businesses need to be focused on.
Yeah.
And all the business leaders need to be aware, whether you're a big, small, whatever, know what these metrics are. It's not just for finance to hold the numbers. You should be aware in terms of how we're trading, what's that looking like, what do the margins look like, what are our costs, how are we sort of leveraged in terms of our overhead costs against what we're generating, and then ultimately, as I say, how does that flow through to cash?
I'm feeling a little bit proud of myself now, because I did a spreadsheet,
There you go.
You never did.
I did 2 weeks ago. I did. No, so I'd done like an income and expenditure spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But then I did the cash flow spreadsheet, because what I realised was exactly that, in terms of all that land, and I had lots of stuff that I was talking about that was exciting, but all of a sudden it was a slightly different story, and upfront costs even to set up a podcast, right? You need to buy equipment and things like that. So, and it's when you're a small business, just saying out those things
absolutely
are critical. Actually, I remember Tristy Harrison saying to me when she said you should set up your own consultancy. And for as they were talking about, keep your costs really low to set off, to give yourself that start. And I think that's always resonated with me.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, I think that one of the hardest things for any small businesses, and I've got a few friends who run their own businesses, that the hardest thing is to get paid. Yeah. It's the thing that you've got to chase quite a lot of the time. Even if you're a great business delivering a great service, people will still be a little bit lazy at that end. So you have to be absolutely aware of that. And I think you're dead right, in terms of keeping your costs in line, it's very easy you can get giddy, you can get carried away. Yes, there's a little bit of speculation you've got to do, but having something that runs along at a very tight cost base means that you can be more flexible, you can be more agile, and then when the good times start to roll in, then you can start to go, well, actually now I've banked this much, I can start to think about it, how it changes going down the line.
Hence why when I first gave Lisa the equipment list for this podcast, we had an interesting debate.
We did.
I didn't think we were doing it today, but we are.
But then you see, you're getting to an argument and go, well, do I go and buy it? Depending on what it is, let's say it's a piece of equipment cost X, and I buy it, or do I hire it and therefore I've not taken such a big hit, but it's a longer term thing, and balancing off those different things and how it can all impact the financials of the business at the end of the day.
I don't think we looked at the longer term solution. We were just like, we need some stuff. How's it going to work?
When I produce this premium list going, maybe we can get a microphone to start off with.
That's it. We go big or go home.
One and you get to then you feel
go big or go home. That's it. You're gonna. We're ready for it anyway when that happens, so that's good. I know asking for a friend. I think bringing it back to some of the leader stuff, I think there could be a real fear around like commerciality and finance, and yes, they can use their business partners, but often that's a fear factor. I don't really know what they're talking about. So if we were trying to create a bit more education around, commercial awareness, maybe the KPIs that I should focus on as a habit, so there's that strategic plan, get myself more familiar with financials so it doesn't feel as scary. what sort of things could they be doing to get themselves in that space?
I think there's obviously lots of stuff out there that you can go away and sort of, you know, I don't want to use the word, it's not, they have loads of things like, you know, let's look at, I'll go online and go, tell me about P&L, and it depends how much knowledge you've got in the first place, of course. You know, I think, you know, as key, your sales, your margins, your costs, your overheads, those kind of things, I think, you know, looking at those in the context of where you're going and what you're spending is really important. As I say, I think that the whole world around cash flow and cash flow cycles is something for sure that people... And actually, once you start to get into it, and you do it on that sort of relatively high level basis, most people start to get that. I think it's when there are some complexities that when you then can get into, and maybe it's more relevant to bigger businesses and not some of the small businesses, you know, in terms of what your accounting standards say and when you were going to take costs in and joys of IFRS 15 and all those things that we've dealt with in the past, Lee, and, you know, that can then start to get a little bit more complicated, and I think that's when you do definitely sort of need to start getting your finance colleagues involved. But I think if you've got the right team around you, you know, you all play in your own skill sets as well. You all play, you know, we talked a lot about swimming in your lanes and all those kind of things. In the same way that I don't understand everything about sales and marketing or running an operational team, you know, use the people that you've got around you, and that's almost the best way to do it.
Yes, I like that.
And I know when we worked together, Mark, like connection to that point was really important.
Yeah.
You know, so I remember like delivering goal setting sessions, you know, to the senior leadership team in the finance department, but equally then being mentored by a finance colleague that can give you and not a structured kind of formal mentoring, but an informal thing where you ask a favour, you know. It's almost like a skilled trade where, could you give me a few sessions to really understand our P&L, or to understand the cost base, you know, we used to, the SAC costs, sales costs, acquisition costs, sorry. Because that's without those understanding that's in a presentation, then someone just sitting down for half an hour and a coffee. I found really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. In the same way that I would sort of go to somebody to go, right, talk to me about this new product we're launching. Why is it different? Why is it good? Why do we think it's going to sell? How are we making it? All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same principle, you know. And I think, you know, you'll find lots of people would be really happy to just go through. And once you sort of start disseminating down, you kind of go, okay, well, I get that, and okay, that kind of makes sense. And you might go, well, why do we put that cost here instead of here? And again, as I say, it'll vary different business to business. Not everyone does it in the same way. And I think once you start to get that high level understanding, that's fine, and you'll probably start to feel more confident about it. Like anything, you always have the world of a little bit of knowledge is sometimes a little bit dangerous. So. But I think for me, it's not just those metrics; it's starting to understand the implications of decisions.
Yeah,
I think that's the real key element for me. That sometimes a lot of businesses will go, right, you know, as I use the price example. Well, we're just going to drop the price because we'll sell more, and everybody else has dropped the price, or you know, well, they're doing this, or we're going to put this TV advert on, and it's going to that's going to cost us like £3 million. That's quite a lot of customers that we've got to bring in to really get that sort of money. So do we really want to do that? Is it the right thing? Is it the right time? You know, I think that's if you can crack that element of it with the support of your finance teams, then you're moving into the right place.
I know there was something that really sparked, like decision making, and a lot of the leaders that we talk to, they're probably trying to influence the culture. Maybe there's recruitment and attraction of people, maybe they're on high performance, so they've got to do, you know, the growth plan. How can being more aware or commercially aware affect some of that decision making? How could it help in that space?
I mean, I think there's a few different ways, I guess. I mean, I think in terms of looking at the plans and how it's been put together, right? If we've done what we said before, we've all sat around and we've got our plan, we're going, right, this is what the 3-year strategy then starts to look like, right? Then that gives you something to set a vision for people to buy into.
Yeah.
It's got to be credible.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because anyone can sit down and write a business plan that goes, well, we're going to be 3 times as big by this time next year. You get credibility from what you've delivered in the past as a business.
That's really important.
And that's as a business, it's not what finance have deemed. That almost buys you the opportunity to then go forward, and if it's investment, whatever it kind of looks like, I think. And I think once you understand that, you've got the financial levers, then you start to align the other bits that sit around it. So you might sort of look at recruitment and you go, right, actually, take the example, we're going to go into a new market, we're going to launch a new product or a new channel or whatever it is, right? Well, we need a team around us to do that. Well, that'll fit as part of the plan because we know we haven't got that resource in today.
Yeah.
So by doing that and spending that amount of money, that's part of the business case that you built up to allow us to hit those goals. But you've all got to sign up to that plan in the first place and go, yes, do we really think we're going to do that? So, if somebody comes along and says to you, right, we're going to launch this new product and we're going to take 50% market share next year, you're kind of going to go, I'm not really sure that's quite the plan. But if it's actually, we could realise quite a lot of value when we're only looking at taking 1% and we think we can spend X, Y, and Z to get there, then you sort of go, okay, well, that's a little bit more credible, I can buy into that, makes sense. Do the cost stack up? Right, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do it as a ramp-up programme or whatever that might look like. So I think it's things like that where you start to think about it. I think from a culture perspective, it's all about, nobody wants to be in a business that's constantly underperforming or missing its targets or stressed financially. So, I think having something that's credible out there allows people to see and believe in terms of what they're being told and both the forward projection plans and what's happened in the past. I think then it's about having the right sort of, again, going back to my discussion around guardrails or governance, what people can and what they can't do, where they can spend the money, where they can't spend the money. I think you've got real clarity around that. I think that really helps that kind of culture. I think where you don't get it is where you hear a narrative of one thing over here, and then you look at the numbers over here and they're completely different, and everyone starts going, "Oh, wait a minute, this doesn't quite work. Why is that the case?" Yeah. So I think that's where being really open and honest in terms of where a business is really performing and where they're at and what they're really trying to do and how achievable that is needs to align to what the financials are really saying.
That really resonates with me because I guess in times of underperformance, if people don't know or they're feeling the stretch and we're not looking at it realistically, it changes people's behaviour and it changes decisions in the moment.
Absolutely.
And it sends people off on a spiral. So if you're able to look at it, it's a protection. The guardrails, it's protecting your culture. Actually, can be a really important part of protecting where you want to go as a business. So. Absolutely, and probably something people don't think about. They don't, they probably haven't automatically gone, having that commercial awareness and and where we are as a business can really impact our culture and what we're trying to do, because it puts people in fear, doesn't it? Sometimes if they're in that stress mode. And
I think so. Really I think it's one of those. It's even more important, I think, in a business that's probably going through some challenging times than it is that a business that's the steering wheel and flying. Because that's where the tough decisions need to be made. And I think people understanding that, they might not always like it, but if they understand it and then there's a realistic expectation, then that's really helpful. So you're in a situation where maybe the trading's not as strong as it needs to be, we need to look at our cost base. Okay, well that means that actually we're pulling back on some recruitment, that we're going to do some marketing spend or whatever it is. There's no point having other leaders over here going, well, I need all these people and we can't. And it's like, well, if we can't afford those people, we need to think about things a little bit differently. And if you can have that open and honest discussion, then it alleviates the tension.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's a danger you get into a world where you get into that kind of silo mentality and you're back into, well, we can't do what we want to do because of X, Y, and Z without really understanding why.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what sparked for me was around, back to the communication overall to the overall organisation, because I think you're right, Lisa. I think it does impact on the culture, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, actually, because otherwise, if people don't have that clarity, they make up their own narrative anyway. They'll see something external where you go, a number of times I've come into an office and someone said, oh, well, I've seen this in the press or I've seen this online. Can you know? So you, as leaders, then you're on the back foot in terms of, well, what is the message?
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can make that message relatively simple, and I think that the simpler you make it without trying to sound, terrible, I think that helps for a lot of people, because sometimes again it can get overly complicated. Going back to what are 3 or 4 big levers. I remember standing up. We did one again where we were previously, and it was all about going back to my theme about cash, and it was talking about costs to acquire a customer.
Yes.
So basically, you've got marketing spend, you might have equipment to spend, you might have to pay some cost to somebody to whatever it is. And I remember we had one of the big meetings where everybody comes in, and I was, as usual, finances up last, all the free nice stuff goes to the front. And all I wanted to do was just explain to people, if it costs, say for example, it costs us £400 to acquire a customer, because of all those things that I talked about in terms of what we paid. And we generate £7, £8, £9 of profit a month from that customer. There's a lot of months that customer's got to stay with us before it becomes a profitable customer for us. Bearing in mind that may be longer than their original contract length. So if we as a business can take that cost to acquire from 400 to 200, say, because we maybe change our marketing strategy, we move more online instead of TV and media, or we do it in a slightly different way in terms of the way that we recruit, or we manage to get some offers through our suppliers, then that makes a whole world of difference in terms of what we're looking at. And that's why we're changing what we're doing from a marketing standpoint. And somebody everyone goes, yeah, that makes quite a lot of sense, that.
Yeah.
And that's just talking about it in quite a simple way. But everybody sort of started to understand, actually now I understand why we're adopting the strategy that we're doing.
I guess though, not every finance department does, but that is a really good key, isn't it, in terms of making things complex feel, simpler. That stakeholder management. Is there anything else? I guess you've come up with lots of times when the business has gone, no, I don't want to do that, and you're trying to influence and persuade. What sort of things have you had to do to try and get it over the line?
You can see the sparks.
Like 1 or 2 times that's been a bit of a challenge. I mean, some businesses, finance is a bit of an afterthought. But I think all you've got to do is you've just got to build the relationships and with the relevant people around. But you've got to go and meet them on their patch. You've got to understand. I'll say to them, look, what are your expectations of finance? How can we help? What are your frustrations? How can we help you? As opposed to just sort of giving it a yes/no kind of world.
Yeah.
And I think once you start to do that, then those barriers start to get broken down. I think once you use data, obviously, look, we can show this, we can demonstrate that. Actually, these are the things that we think we can bring to you and your team that maybe will help you in your decision making and your performance.
Yes.
That's always quite helpful. And sometimes it's just demonstration of the results. That's what I've generally found is the easiest way to do it, and it's not always easy, but it's the best way to do it. I think you've got to understand each side of the argument. What you've got to do, what they've got to do, why it's important. Even things like the age-old PO sign-off process, and why people need to have all that kind of thing, and everyone goes, it's just all a pain, why do we need to do it, and this and that and the other. Well, again, if you're in a situation where you try and manage your cash management and where's it going and what does it look like going forward, if you haven't got those, you haven't got that visibility, then you might suddenly get hit by something that you weren't expecting. That could then throw a spanner in the works. So sometimes 5 minutes of a bit of time just to get a process get working saves in the long run.
I heard your intake of breath when you said PO.
I did. Waiting for a few. Anyway.
There's also 2 sides of a coin, isn't there?
There is.
But that's all about, again, is about having the right, going back to the guardrails and the governance, having something that is, it's flexible enough for the business to work with, and it's not overly onerous on everybody, but it's also robust enough to give you what that particular business needs.
I'd like to work with you, Mark. I like the more human element of it.
But talking about that and just building, so the more human element, so not only did Mark come in, I've seen Mark come in and talk from a business point of view in terms of sales acquisition costs. Actually, the breakthrough for me is when you started to speak in just human terms of what you do at home. Budgeting.
Yeah.
And actually that made it really relatable to me, and then more curious around, I wonder what that now actually means. So, if I'm running their leadership program, I didn't ever think about cost, ever. And actually it was when we were having those conversations that it suddenly switched for me. So everybody in the room could start to think, okay, well, I know that I budget at Christmas, for example.
Yeah.
And therefore, well then how do you relate it then to the business world? And it's most simplest of terms.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about that. Ask it for a friend. But we work with a lot of HRDs, you know, who and there's topics they want to get through. So they want to, you know, a well-being program or a leadership program which is linked to performance, or they're trying. It could be a culture program. How do they need to look at it so it is a business case? What are the things that they need to be thinking about to make it more credible and get things over the line? Because this is a real challenge that people are telling us, you know, currently, because budgets are tight.
Yeah, and it's one of the first things that always. Absolutely. And I think, you know, you just got to understand. It's a case of understanding what the costs that we're going to have to take on board for doing this program. You know, whether that's, you know, you've got to bring people in, whether that's hiring, whether that's, you know, what does it ultimately mean? But what is it that we're trying to drive off the back of it? Now, it's the problem always becomes because it's a little bit more intangible. So it's not as though you're driving a sales number or you know, an operational saving or whatever. But I think there are still things that you can point to in terms of that cultural piece that you're looking to do that hopefully changes the mindset of a business. So it might be actually by doing this program, we think we can reduce our staff turnover by 0.5%, which means we've got less recruitment fees, for example, just as one off the top of my head. It might be that we think that actually by better collaboration we become more efficient. We can probably put a number on that. I'm trying to think of something, you know, by doing this, there may be some other costs that we think we can. It's always harder, right? But I think if you can try and get under the skin of those a little bit, and again have something credible that you're talking to when you're putting it in place, then that's again really helpful. It might be that you're looking to improve your employee engagement survey, which means X, Y, and Z on the top of it. So there are things that you can do. It just becomes a little bit more difficult to do.
And I think that's it, that we've probably not enough focus on what are the metrics in the business that we could utilise or use. You know, like as you said, you've said 3 or 4 there that, you know, people could look at in terms of efficiency or engagement or absenteeism. So
recruitment costs, whatever it is. You know, I think absenteeism. You know, there's always programs about how you manage staff welfare and those sorts of things, and returns to work. And again, all that should be taken into account. I think those sorts of things. I mean, you'll always have, some people will always look at these things and just have a bit of a blind spot to them. Even finance people sometimes will just go, oh, it's just an overhead. I've had a conversation with the previous boss going, we've got to keep it really tight, they're just an overhead. And I'm going, well, alright, this person may think that you're bringing them down, I don't say they're going to cost, that's just £50,000 for this person. But I know by having them in, all the controls, the governance, the accounting around this particular project is going to be, we're going to be on top of. And when we come to sell it, because it's quite a complicated tax structure and all that sort of stuff, if you don't do that right, you're going to have lots of problems on the sale around getting the money back out of the company, the tax, and it's going to cost you infinitely more to unwind it at that point in time than it is for this person. So there are all ways that you can articulate it.
People as assets, I hear just then, you know, like utilising skills and experience and capability as an asset in the business as well as the numbers.
And I will always argue in any business it's about having the right assets in the right places, and you'll find in lots of businesses that's not necessarily the case. I go back to the levers, the big rocks and those sorts of things, because people will have pet projects which they really like, but you know, or just that's the way we've always done it. So you know, if you want to navigate change, there's the right skill set. No, that's quite hard to do that, so we'll just keep doing what we've always done. I mean, I think in terms of just into thinking about programs and so one of the most insightful ones that I ever did was when I was back at a company, it's about 10-11 years ago now, and we wanted to really bring cash to the fore. Going back to my theme of cash. So I did a program with each of the countries. So it's a multi-country business. Went to all the management teams and did a presentation to them about why cash was important. And that was ultimately, the idea was saying to everybody around that table, you all influence the cash. Whether it's you're the sales manager, well, it's all about pricing, that influence it, or it might be the customers that we're selling to and the terms that we've got, or it might be the marketeer in terms of what promotions we're doing and how we're spending our marketing money. It might be the operations guy because you run customer service and it's all about making sure that's right so that we get paid promptly. Or you might run the call centre to solve the fixes for our customers so that there's no delay in those payments. Or you might be the purchasing director. Well, that's the contracts and what do they look like and what terms are we paying them on. And then you could do that with all their teams. So actually the whole idea was that everybody in the business understood actually some of the decisions I make on a day-to-day basis impacts our cash profile.
Wow, yeah.
And you can do that whether you're a big business, small business, whatever, but it starts to get people to buy into that and start to think in a very different way, as opposed to just thinking, well, it's all just the business's money and it's not really my problem.
Yeah. And do you know, I just made a friend on most of my career, I probably haven't ever seen the cash. There's probably only one or two areas where I've actually seen the cash flow.
Yeah.
So if I was a leader, what would I be looking for? Where on might be numpty, but where on a reporting might I look for cash flow? Where would that be shown?
Well, you normally have you have your P&L, your balance sheet and your cash flow. Everyone obsesses about the profit and loss account. What's the sales number? What's the margin number? What's the profit at the end of it? And whilst the cash flow there are ins and outs and there are some complications in it, ultimately what you're trying to look at is what is the cash that we are generating each month. That's the important number. And how does that cash that we're generating compare to the profit that we're generating? You know, and the higher that percent, you look at a ratio, so the higher that ratio, the more healthy in theory that the business is.
Yeah.
So if you can generate, I don't know, 70, 80, 90% of your profits into cash, that means actually you're in quite a healthy state. If you're much lower percentage, you kind of go, well, where's that cash drain? Where's it all going? And how really sustainable is that for what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
So I think quite often you don't even need to look at all the ins and outs, because there are lots of things that move around and balance sheet movements and all this sort of stuff, and things that are in the P&L that get extracted for cash and what have you. But just that cash number each month, what are we generating, is the important number.
Wow. So if we had to ask our business partners anything, that would be a key thing.
Absolutely.
Fascinated.
You've had your masterclass, the messy class that is right there. Listen back. In a month's time, listen back to this and you'll be like, right, okay, I'm on it.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Brilliant. Wrapping up then today, what's one piece of advice for leaders listening to this, or to aspiring leaders, that can help them in their journey of leadership around what we've been talking about?
I would say don't be afraid to ask the question. And I know that's not necessarily specific to finance, but don't be afraid to go and ask, can you just talk to me, help me understand this, help me understand how this business, where we make money, where we don't make money, what those kind of real levers are, how we kind of fit into that. I think, you know, if you start to understand those things, then you, as I say, you get into your world of implications of decision making and all those elements, and know your cash number.
Yeah, where we make money, where we don't, and where's our cash.
That's it.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much.
No problem.
One final question.
One final.
Who's the person that we should have in this seat as an outstanding leader, and what are you going to do to help us get them there?
Who should you have in this seat, an outstanding leader? Depends what sort of leader you want, I suppose. What, finance wise or just any wise?
Any wise.
Oh, blimey, you're asking me now. Well, I could say Alex Ferguson, but I'm not sure how we're going to get him in.
The boss. How do we get the boss in?
Tag him.
Come knock on his door. Do you know what?
Is there any leader in particular who gets this, like the commercial awareness, and it's really made them successful? Is there any?
There probably is. I mean, some of the best people I've worked for have all kind of retired since now. Since then.
They've done so well.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I had a great boss when I was at SSL. Ian Adamson he was the MD of the business, so I was his right-hand finance guy. It was brilliant to sort of travel beyond his coattails and learn loads about how to run a business, how to motivate people, how to put strategy in place in an incredibly successful business with some pretty funky brands, because we were working with Durex and Shaw, so we had quite a lot of fun around Europe and doing that sort of stuff. So he was probably one of the best leaders that I ever worked for, and learned a hell of a lot from.
Amazing.
How are you going to get him in this chair? I'll have to think about that.
And how to get you in front of more leaders so that they really need to know this stuff, without a doubt.
Wow.
There we are.
Hopefully it was useful.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your time.
No problem at all. Thank you.